When you begin to understand the true influence of affirmations, you start to realize that every thought you repeat carries power, direction, and emotional weight that gradually shapes your entire life experience. The human mind is not a passive observer, but an active creative force that constantly absorbs, interprets, and responds to the messages you give it on a daily basis. When those messages are negative, uncertain, or filled with doubt, your subconscious mind begins to accept them as instructions and reflects them in your behavior, your choices, and ultimately your results. However, when you intentionally replace those thoughts with structured and meaningful affirmations, you begin to reprogram your internal dialogue in a way that supports confidence, clarity, and personal growth. This process is not about pretending or ignoring reality. Instead, it is about consciously choosing the direction of your mental focus so that your subconscious mind receives consistent, positive guidance. Over time, these repeated statements begin to feel natural, and what once felt like a forced idea slowly transforms into a deeply rooted belief system. Inspired by the teachings associated with Dr. Joseph Murphy, this approach emphasizes that the subconscious mind does not distinguish between imagination and reality. It simply accepts what is repeatedly impressed upon it. That is why the practice of saying, "I am confident," "I am capable," or "I am successful" is not just motivational language, but a deliberate mental training exercise. As these affirmations are spoken with emotion, focus, and consistency, they begin to replace old patterns of self-doubt and fear. This transformation does not happen instantly, but through repetition and persistence, the mind gradually reorganizes itself around these new beliefs. In daily life, this shift can be observed in subtle but powerful ways, such as improved self-talk, increased willingness to take action, and a stronger sense of self-worth. The real power of affirmations lies not in the words alone, but in the mental and emotional energy behind them. Because the subconscious mind responds most strongly to repeated thoughts that carry feeling and conviction. As this inner alignment grows stronger, external behavior begins to reflect the internal change, creating a cycle of positive reinforcement that builds confidence from within. As this inner transformation continues to develop, the practice of affirmations becomes more than just a daily exercise. It becomes a way of living and thinking that gradually reshapes how a person responds to challenges, opportunities, and personal interactions. Instead of reacting with hesitation or self-doubt, the mind trained through consistent affirmations begins to default toward calmness, assurance, and constructive thinking. This shift is important because confidence is not something that appears suddenly. It is built through repeated mental conditioning that strengthens the belief in one's own abilities. When affirmations are practiced with sincerity, the subconscious mind starts to align with a new identity being created through language and thought. Over time, this alignment influences decision-making, emotional resilience, and even the way a person carries themselves in everyday situations. Inspired by the principles often associated with Dr. Joseph Murphy, the idea is that the mind acts like fertile soil, and whatever seeds, positive or negative, are planted most frequently will eventually grow and dominate the mental landscape. Therefore, choosing affirmations carefully and repeating them with intention becomes a powerful method of shaping personal reality. For example, consistent statements such as, "I am growing stronger every day," or "I trust myself to make the right decisions," gradually rewire the subconscious framework that governs automatic thoughts and reactions. As these new thought patterns take hold, old limiting beliefs begin to lose their influence, not through force but through replacement. This process encourages patience and consistency because mental reprogramming is gradual and requires repetition over time. Many people begin to notice subtle changes first, such as improved focus, reduced anxiety in social situations, or a stronger sense of motivation when facing tasks that once felt overwhelming. Eventually, these small changes accumulate into significant personal transformation. The individual begins to feel more in control of their life, not because external circumstances have immediately changed, but because their internal perception of themselves has evolved. In this way, affirmations serve as a bridge between present limitations and future potential, guiding the mind toward a more empowered state of being. Through continued practice, the spoken word becomes a tool of creation, shaping thoughts, emotions, and actions in a direction that supports confidence, growth, and long-term success. As the practice of affirmations becomes more deeply integrated into daily life, a person begins to experience a noticeable shift not only in thought patterns, but also in emotional stability and overall mindset. This stage of transformation is often subtle at first, yet it becomes increasingly powerful as consistency continues. The mind, once filled with uncertainty and self-criticism, gradually begins to adopt a more supportive and encouraging internal voice. This is where the teachings inspired by Dr. Joseph Murphy become especially relevant, as they emphasize that the subconscious mind operates continuously and responds most strongly to repeated mental impressions. When affirmations are repeated with belief, clarity, and emotional involvement, they begin to overwrite old mental conditioning that may have been formed over years of doubt or negative experiences. As a result, the individual starts to feel a growing sense of inner peace, as if a mental weight has been lifted. This does not mean that challenges disappear from life, but rather that the response to those challenges changes significantly. Instead of feeling overwhelmed or discouraged, the mind becomes more solution-oriented and resilient, allowing for clearer thinking and more confident action. Over time, this new way of thinking becomes the default setting, influencing not just internal dialogue, but also external behavior, communication, and decision-making. The repetition of positive statements such as, "I am confident in my abilities," or "I remain calm and focused under pressure," begins to create a mental foundation that supports stability even in uncertain situations. This transformation is gradual, requiring patience and trust in the process, but its long-term impact is profound. The subconscious mind, once aligned with these new beliefs, begins to work automatically in favor of them, guiding attention toward opportunities rather than obstacles and encouraging behavior that reflects self-assurance. As this alignment deepens, individuals often notice that they are more willing to take initiative, express themselves more clearly, and step outside of their comfort zones with greater ease. These changes are not forced, but emerge naturally as the internal belief system evolves. In essence, affirmations act as a form of mental training that reshapes identity from within, gradually replacing limitations with empowerment. The consistent use of this practice builds a bridge between thought and reality, where what is repeatedly affirmed begins to influence what is experienced. Through this ongoing process, the individual begins to understand that confidence is not something external that must be acquired, but something internal that can be developed, strengthened, and sustained through conscious mental discipline and repetition.